Hello everyone, this is Seantroid again, and I thought I would just do a little something different this time, this video. It's been a while. I've been kind of thinking about E3 and the stuff that was kind of thrown out to us, and I've had a lot of time to think about ideas, what I like, what I don't like, what can be added and whatnot. So I thought since there's been rumors about possible leaks of the full roster of the new Marvel vs. Capcom game, which of course I like. I thought I'd throw in my 2 cents, bit of ideas on, certain characters that can be improved upon, characters I'd like to see, maybe little ideas of what I have for the story. Just kind of throw something out there so that, people can kind of toss that around, see what is a good idea and what isn't. All right, so anyways, I'm just going to focus on the Marvel side for this video. I'll do another one for Capcom because, they're both pretty big franchises on their own, so I'll just kind of split into two so it's not a long video. Anyway, so to get started, I thought first I'd talk about Iron Man. I like how they added the repulsor rays to his move set. I think that's a really good idea because the way it was before, it was just kind of weird, considering that we see him shoot long repulsor ray blasts, and in the other games it's just a small little burst. Didn't make sense to me, so I'm glad that they put that in. Is that I'm a little disappointed at the hyper combos, because usually when they have hyper combos, like they're big things, they're different, they represent the character, and they've just given him, which I like in the first place. It's not exactly true to Iron Man, but it's a fun little Capcom thing, a mix of both worlds, because Iron Man has tech, Capcom has lots of big laser stuff in their fighting games, and so I like it, but having one just be a straightforward proton cannon and then having to do a separate input to do the same thing that's basically just angled upwards, I think that's a bit, uncreative on their part. So I've been thinking, well, what could be a good Iron Man hyper combo? Because Iron Avenger is pretty cool, but what else could they do? And so I got to thinking, and then I kind of came up with an obvious answer for that. And I think you guys might be able to think of it too. But before I say what it is, I just want to reference a different character. You may know from Marvel vs. Capcom 2, there was a character called Sansan. And one of her hyper combos was to become some giant ape. And in that thing, it was like a armor transformation, similar to what Arthur has and what Mega Man X will have. She just turned into this big monkey, and she got her punches replaced with just two standard punches, pretty heavy hitting, and then her kicks were instead replaced with just some kind of laser beam from her mouth. And so I kind of looked at that and I thought, it would make a lot of sense if Iron Man had something like that in the form of the Hulkbuster. So in this version of his hyper combo, the Iron Man or the Hulkbuster armor would just kind of come towards him, in a similar fashion as it does to the other characters. Kind of like in Iron Man 3, where that whole opening is the pieces of his suit coming to him. They could all just form around him, or they could just digitalize if you want to. But essentially it would be he summons the Hulkbuster armor, and so for a brief amount of time, he's just, not going to be as maneuverable or as flying as he could be, but he's able to do heavy hitting punches in the form of his punch attacks. And then for his kicks, he could have like a short little repulsor blast, or I'd even like to see a bit of a rocket fist. I think that would be pretty cool. And so, yeah, you can kind of do that, and you can take some of the moves straight off of the Hulk for the punching animations, because it's the Hulk Buster. It makes sense that it would fight similar to Hulk. And the thing is that, with other costumes, other skins, as some people like to call them, I call them skins, other people might call them costumes. One of the things you can do with that is for each different skin, it could be a different version of the Hulkbuster. Not necessarily doing something different, but just an aesthetic change that would kind of be a little nod to people who have read comics with that version of the Hulkbuster. It's like, oh, I remember that one from when he fought the Hulk that one time. I remember that from a different comic. So I think that would be a nice little change. That's all I really want to say about Iron Man. And yeah, I'd really like to see that implemented because, you know, even if they have an angled version of the proton cannon, I still count it as one hyper combo, and that really only gives them two. And since they gave Spencer a new hyper combo, I'd really like to see them do the same for Iron Man. Alright, so next up is potentially a DLC character that I'd like to see. It may be difficult with the roster the way it is now, but, you know, I'd still like them to at least consider it. And that would be Rocket and Groot. Now, we already have Rocket as a playable character, and Groot comes in as part of his special moves and one of his hyper combos. But I'd like to see is basically Groot and Rocket in their classic skin, if they could. And have them like as a tag team, you know, with Rocket on Groot's shoulders. So Groot would basically be doing all the punches and possibly kicks, if that would even make sense for him. But then Rocket would be there for some of his specials. So it'd be kind of like a switch up. And so I was thinking, you know, they could have special moves like Rocket would jump and attack a character and then just kind of return on his rocket skates. And like each variation would be like maybe one variation is just him clawing at the opponent. The other one could be them blasting him point blank in the face when he lands on them. And it could be a punishable move too. Like you can actually hit Rocket out of the air and then he'll just kind of like fall down and then run back to Groot. And so that'll kind of, you know, make it a bit more of a pause in between attacks. And hyper combos and other specials, I would think, you know, Groot would just kind of steal a bit from Omega Red and just kind of have some vine whipping attacks. But one hyper combo that I thought would have been really interesting, which may be hard to implement, but still I'd like to see, is kind of like a remnants of Dark Phoenix from the Marvel vs. Capcom 3. If you remember that, Jean Grey, when she got the hyper combo maxed out, if she got hit and KO'd, it would basically turn into a cutscene where she turns into Dark Phoenix and then she's powered up, but she starts draining life. So it's kind of like a Hail Mary sort of thing, which is difficult for her character, but I really don't want to talk about that. But anyways, yeah, you can max out the hyper combo bar gauge, and then when the final blow is landed on Groot, he just kind of sacrifices himself, and maybe like, you know, he'll be seen, you know, trying to cover Rocket to make sure he doesn't get hit, but Groot would basically be the one to take the hit, and then Rocket goes into kind of rage mode and is like, I'll kill you or something like that. And then, you know, you just play as Rocket, which would be strange because there's already a Rocket in game, so maybe you'd have to, you know, change some of the moves so that they don't involve the Groot assist. Otherwise, why wouldn't he be there for the rest of it? So I think maybe it wouldn't be, you know, the easiest thing to implement. It would definitely be DLC and not part of the full roster. But I still think that it would be a great idea maybe in different games going on, like in Marvel vs. Capcom 5, which is kind of strange because this one's 4, and then you go to 5 after Infinite. And I don't really see how you do that. There's only been like 3 games in the history of it. Although I guess if you count the X-Men versus Street Fighter and the Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter, then technically you have 5 so far. But then, well, I guess you also have Marvel Superheroes, and then X-Men Children of the Atom is kind of considered like the forerunner of all this. So then there would be 7. I guess it is technically 8. That's weird. I wonder if they thought of that. Anyways, yeah, so just a potential idea going forward. I can't really think of much else, you know, after I already saw that Rocket was revealed. I didn't really think too much of it. But the next character I'm going to talk about is one that I find really interesting, and I'd definitely like to see this, and that would be Ant-Man. Apparently Ant-Man is in the is in this leak as a playable character. I haven't really seen anything of it except that someone says, oh yeah, Ant-Man's definitely going to be in it. And I think that would be really cool because then he could have like, special attacks where it's like he shrinks down and it's basically a teleport, but he shrinks down and he reappears and does like an uppercut or something, or just like launches himself, and it would be a really hard one to block, but he just shrinks down, jumps, and then punches the opponent. And the best part is you don't have to animate too much of it, because when he shrinks, it's basically he's invisible. So then it's just a hit animation and then he reappears wherever. Another one of his specials could possibly be, turning into Giant Man, not like too gigantic, but maybe just like a bit tall, and then having like some kind of wind up, double hit where he like claps his hands together and just kind of whacks someone like he's swinging an invisible baseball bat or something like that. I don't know what that move is called, but that would be a cool move to have. Give him give a bit of risk reward. It's a hard hitting attack if it lands, but because of the wind up and because he becomes bigger and a much bigger target, it leaves him open. So there's definitely a little bit of balancing that can be done there. And one thing I definitely would like to see is having the Wasp as one of his special moves, because then she could just kind of like float around him or fly around him and whatnot. And then for a special, she can do like different kinds of blasts, like maybe one stinger shot, and then for a harder punch or kick, it could be double stinger shot. And then you could have definitely more dialogue between them in the opening fight scenes, and then in the victory scenes. I feel like there's definitely a lot they could do there with that, and you wouldn't have to really animate her that much because she'd be kind of small, so you only have to worry about the special moves and stuff like that, having her follow around. And the question I think really that comes into mind is, which Ant-Man are we going to get? Because if you have Ultron, it would make sense it would be the Henry Pym from the comics, since he technically created Ultron in the comics, and they're saying that this one isn't tied to the Marvel Universe, where it's the cinematic universe, and that means Iron Man didn't create Ultron, so it makes sense. But then again, if they are kind of pandering a bit more to the cinematic universe, to the fans of the movies, since you can kind of see that Rocket is in his Guardians of the Galaxy uniform from the first one, and even Groot looks like he's designed from the movie, but Gamora is different, so it's a bit confusing. But they might consider bringing in Scott Lang and having him be that one, which wouldn't really make much sense since he has nothing to do with Ultron. But that's the thing, you could probably split them up. So like half of the skin selections you can be Hank Pym's version of Ant-Man, and then the other half you can be Scott Lang's version of Ant-Man. And then you can have different variations like that, different voice dialogues and stuff like that. And then for Wasp, when Wasp is there, when it's Scott Lang, they can introduce this new Wasp that they have, which I don't really want to talk about her much because I feel like it might be a bit of a spoiler thing to say. But you can add that, and then that can play into the interesting dynamic that those two characters could have, just like that. And yeah, I definitely think Ant-Man's going to be in because we saw with Hawkeye's hyper combo, the one where in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, it would have just been him using the Ant-Man arrow, where Ant-Man's on the arrow and then he attacks, but looks like they kept the opening animation for that, but then they switched it to him just doing a barrage of different types of arrows. So it makes me think Ant-Man's going to be in, and I'd love to see some of his hyper combos, because I know one of them is going to be Giant Man, where he just he could either be just a giant size, and kind of like I said with Hulkbuster, he's just kind of got a few moves, like a few punches, a few kicks, although I feel like it would be better just to kind of like switch him into like being so gigantic that you don't even see him, and then he just does a barrage of punches and stomps on the ground and attacks the opponent like that. That I think would be the better version of Giant Man to have. Another hyper combo they could have, this one might be the level 3 one, but like one where he grabs the opponent, and then if he actually connects the grab, then he'll shrink them down, and then when they after they're shrunk down, you'll see that the opponent is standing on an anthill, all kind of confused. and then Ant-Man can, press like a button or something on his helmet, or just, indicate that, he's summoning the ants, and then he can say something clever like, now you're the man on the anthill, or something like that, or don't mess with the man on the anthill. Something kind of reference the comics a bit. And then he will summon a bunch of ants out of the anthill, and each ant will kind of do like damage, so it'll be like a swarm of ants coming out of the anthill, just pummeling the opponent. I think that'd be a pretty cool thing to have. Another hyper combo, I guess, is very dependent on whether or not they add Wasp or not, which is, again, I'd really like to see them do. I'd like to see them have her, kind of like dash towards the opponent, like, something kind of like a really fast bullet type thing. And then if she connects with the opponent and they're not blocking, then you just turn to a cutscene of her doing various blasts, like flying around them up and down and whatnot, shooting them, and then they can just like I guess kind of insinuate that she would like go inside their armor or in their mouth or something like that, and then start shooting them from the inside, which is kind of one of the great things that that the Wasp is good at, is kind of like getting into the weak spots of an opponent and just letting loose and stuff like that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a cutscene even. It could just be like her dashing towards the opponent, and if the move lands, then you'll just see the opponent getting hit a lot by some kind of invisible force, and basically just suggesting that a Wasp is inside the opponent's armor or whatnot, just blasting away. And then you can have Ant-Man kind of do some dialogue like, "Whoa, Wasp, be careful in there," something like that, just kind of give him a reason to be standing by and whatnot. And that's pretty much all I have to say about Ant-Man, aside from the fact that if they do DLC costumes, you definitely have to give him Yellow Jacket, because I'd really like to see that, and maybe even different versions of Giant Man, because there was Goliath and I think different versions of Giant Man, so maybe that would be something that the Scott Lang version could have. But anyways, I'd definitely be excited to see Ant-Man in there. One character I think is a really excellent choice, but I don't think she's gonna make it in. Like, definitely not in the full roster, but like maybe not even as DLC, and that would be Mystique from the X-Men series. I know there's been all this issue with the movies of Fox owning the rights to the X-Men movies, and Marvel owning the rights to everything that isn't that in Fantastic Four. But I think that if they could implement her, that would be great, because as I saw on the wiki there, it says that that they don't plan on like just forgetting about Wolverine and all those characters like that, and hopefully they don't kind of make some kind of embargo or something like that where X-Men characters can't be in it. But like Mystique would be great for that, because then she can kind of represent all the other mutants that have like small powers but aren't really in it, that like can't really be like full-fledged characters, and that's where she can make them shine. So like one of her special moves could be flight, and she just turn into Angel or Archangel, whichever version, and then she'll start flying around and doing some punches and kicks like that. And another one of her special moves could be turning into Beast and lunging forward and doing some claw attacks. And when she blocks, she can turn into Mammoth or something like that. One of the heavier characters, and just block attacks like that. I think that would be really great, because then you kind of bring in a lot more from the X-Men universe in one character. And it may be difficult because you'd have to animate all those things, but I definitely think it would be worthwhile, even if they can't implement a lot, because she's still a pretty good character on her own. And if you base it a bit off the X-Men movies, where you make her a more flexible character, and then she does all these kind of cool flips in midair and all these different kicks and leg grapples and whatnot, I think that would be really interesting gameplay wise. I'd be really excited to see. Another character that's kind of really a joke character that I've been thinking of, that I wasn't taking seriously, but now I'm kind of warming up to it, is seeing Cottonmouth in there. And for those of you who don't know, Cottonmouth is a villain who primarily focuses on Luke Cage. If you've seen the Netflix series, he's in there. I think they did a good job for the most part portraying him. But I'd like to see him just like in his getup, because in the comics he looks more like a pimp, and so he could have like a, using his cane to attack people, and one of his grabs could be biting them with his razor sharp teeth. And they seem to play a lot on him using a rocket launcher, so I definitely like to see that, because then you can kind of take some moves from Nemesis, where just whipping the rocket launcher around and even firing a rocket every now and again being some of his attacks, and then having a hyper combo where he summons a Pitmobile or something like that to just stomp on the other characters. I think that'd be really funny. And I don't really think that's one they'll implement, but just as kind of like a bit of fun, that's one character I'm gonna throw out there. And then lastly, I'm just gonna make a little prediction here that I played the story mode demo, and it seems like it's basically just you go from a cutscene to fighting some like just henchmen. You fight drones. You fight these weird ex-guardians, they called them. So it's basically just cutscene to cutscene with a bit of basic fighting in between. So I think that they might implement some kind of side scrolling, where kind of similar to Smash Brothers, where you kind of move around, and then once you get into a fight, then it just kind of stops you right there, and then you have to fight everyone, like pretty much like a basic beat 'em up style game, where you just keep going from left to right, just proceeding as you do, and then you get stopped by some villains and whatnot that you have to attack along the way. I feel like that would be like a great kind of change of pace, instead of just like sitting around watching the cutscene, then going back to playing some of the game and just defeating a few enemies, and then maybe throwing a boss in between there, which I definitely like to see more bosses, but we don't know yet who's going to be a boss and what they exactly have planned. But yeah, I'm just going to say that I think side scrolling is definitely going to be a part of this, because that would just make the game a bit more interesting, because then you can have like them flying around, and then they get stopped in mid-flight, and they have to do some fighting, maybe even in air for some of the fighting characters. It doesn't look like you can choose who you fight in any particular scenario, but they may change that to be a bit more like Smash Brothers, where you definitely have to pick a certain character for the story to make sense, because you can't just be like, oh, okay, well, Captain America and X are going to find these guys, but then suddenly you're fighting as Thanos for whatever reason. So maybe they'll give you a bit of selection, where it's like if you have, Iron Man, Rocket, Dante, and Hawkeye, you get to choose, okay, maybe I'll just do Hawkeye and Iron Man, and maybe you can even have like Dante and Rocket in the reserves or something like that. So if it's like both of those characters get knocked out, then maybe you can summon another one or something like that. I'm not quite sure how they're going to do it, but I'm definitely interested in seeing the story mode. I feel like it's something they've missed out a lot on, and I'm definitely giving them full credit for trying to do something a bit more creative, a bit more unconventional for their fighting games, and I'm definitely looking excited for a new one. And I'll just say a stage idea is Ego. I'd love to fight on Ego, the living planet. I think that would be fun, or even just like a tour of the Marvel cosmos, where maybe you see Ego in the background, you see Galactus, a whole bunch of other people. I'm definitely throwing that in if we get to vote on stages or anything like that. I'd definitely love to fight on Ego. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I have for the Marvel side. Again, I'll do another Capcom video later, but until then, this is pretty much what I have, and if they update on anything, then I'll definitely make a video about that. Just kind of see if they even take any of my ideas to heart, if they're even listening. But yeah, I feel like some of these things, especially Ant-Man, would definitely be great input. So I guess that'll be it for this video. So until next time.